Hey guys, it's Ben the Coin Geek at Old Pueblo Coin, and today I have the first of a three-part interview with Mike Nottelmann of the Coin Show podcast, where I will introduce you to Mike and his show and his partner. So sit back, pop some popcorn, and enjoy the interview. Hey guys, it's Ben the Coin Geek here, and today I'm joined by my guest Mike Nottelmann from the Coin Show podcast. Mike, thanks for joining us today, and I've got a lot of questions about podcasting and a little bit about you and your history. So welcome.
It's my pleasure.
So first of all, a podcast, how in the world, so you have the longest running Coin Show podcast in the universe, is that correct?
Well, at least that's our claim. Okay, there's no actual evidence to back it up because all there are other podcasts, but I believe it is to be true. Yes, we've been doing the Coin Show podcast for over 10 years now.
So how did you get into podcasting? Like how did it come about? Like, you know what? I like coins. Now I'm going to do a podcast. And 10 years ago, podcasting was nowhere near as popular as it is now.
No, not at all. It was brand new. So I happened into it more by accident than anything else. I'm an avid reader, and I was a really, really passionate collector of U.S. coins, and particularly modern U.S. coins. That's the kind of stuff that I liked. So I would go to this forum called Coin Talk on the internet, and there are tons of experts, pretty much in any field you could possibly want: ancients, currency, U.S., modern U.S. And so I learned an awful lot from some of these people. One of them was a gentleman by the name of Matt Dinger, and Matt runs Lost Dutchman Rare Coins in Indianapolis. Matt is a really passionate collector. He started running a shop at age 23, so I think you'll see some, parallels. He got his shop fairly young, and he's been really, really fairly successful at it. Well, no, he's been very successful at it, and he's managed to really build a great shop in Indianapolis. Matt is younger, so he was plugged into more of the modern technology and things like that. I'm an older guy, so he literally put up a thread on Coin Talk saying, "I'd really like to start a podcast. Is anybody interested?" And it was like I was the first person that replied. He didn't say that I was qualified. He didn't say I was like anything else. He said, "I hired you because you were the first guy that answered." And I was like, okay, I could live with that.
Is that like in the firing line, and when everyone says, "Hey, volunteer," and then like everyone steps back, but you, and so you're still forward?
I guess so. It was cool because I had absolutely no idea how to do it, no idea how to make it happen. We started with a third person who helped us with some of the technological end of it, but ultimately the three-person chemistry really didn't work very well. So we kind of pared it down to a two-person show. And yeah, we've been going ever since, and just having a lot of fun doing it.
How many episodes do you guys do a month?
Well, we do 2 episodes a month, sometimes 3, depending on the month. Right, we go every other week. Now,
Okay.
on the off weeks, we have a completely different podcast that Matt and I do. For the patrons of our show. So we have a Patreon page where we say, hey, look, if you dig what we do and you want to help us out, you can come in, you can donate. If you donate at a $5 a month level or better, right, you get access to the second podcast where we do show planning. We do just sometimes we just get together and BS. We have been known to play games on that. We I'm telling you, we had a game on there we did where Matt actually had to walk in Legos. It was a torture game. It was one of those. He had to walk in Legos, and he really hated me for like the next 3 weeks for that. And his feet didn't recover for a while.
So you guys have your normal podcast, and then you have it's behind a Patreon page. Is that what it is?
It's behind a Patreon page. Mm-hmm. Our podcast is called the Coin Show Podcast, oddly enough. And so our off week podcast is called Not the Coin Show Podcast. And it is about as polar opposite to our show as you can get. Our podcast.
Because your show is very structured.
It is. It's really.
You have a regimented, we're talking about this, then this, then this.
And we have a pattern that we follow too. I mean, for our podcast, we start out with news in the world of coin collecting. Now, this is not me reporting on the news. This is me basically reading news stories that you can find in your internet media. So I go to coinworld.com, I go to, coinnews.net, I go to Mint News blog, all these really great places where they put out this content. And I search for the stuff that interests me. And then I write, a little newscast and I go through it. And then in my own personal touch, we always have a stupid sponsor for our news. So
Hey, you're coming to like my favorite. I, I actually have that on my list of things to ask you about.
okay,
I'm gonna,
we'll
since you,
say that.
no, it's fine. We'll tackle it now. So one of my favorite things is I was actually going to ask you, but how you get so many how you get so many great sponsors.
Oh, they're
But maybe
classic.
now you can explain to everybody about the sponsorships that you have.
Okay, so here, hold on a second. Let me give you a typical Coin Show podcast sponsorship because I've got them in front of me. It's
Because I mean, I've been looking for sponsors.
oh,
Then you can
well,
explain to
see,
me
you got to
sometime
talk to the
how
right people. That's all. So,
you can tell me how
um,
well it pays too. I want to.
you know what? Here, there is one company that keeps calling and calling, and it's the excuses. The people from excuses. Let's see. Where is the excuses one? Oh, I gotta find it. It's probably the best of all time. We did excuses when you really don't want to own it. Excuses, and the problem is that they still haven't paid us. They call us every week. They tell us our check is in the mail. All this, I just don't get it. So yeah, we did stuff like that. This episode of the Coin Show podcast is brought to you by waffles. Before you could put pancakes in a toaster, there were waffles. The breakfast of independent children for over 50 years. Waffles.
Yeah. I
So yeah, it's big
Okay.
time. Yeah,
So before this, now the funny thing is, you read that like a professional, like you've been doing, you're doing radio commercial voiceovers for years, and yet before coins, before the show, well, not even before, because you were a collector when you got onto the podcast. You weren't in the industry yet, right? So what were you doing at the time you got into the podcast professionally?
professionally, I was a teamster. I was a warehouseman for a grocery chain. And what I did was I stacked pallets of meat and produce every night to put on a trailer and send off to the stores for their grocery deliveries.
Well, I can see
I
then,
can't.
the coin show podcast is probably quite a big thing for you then, because it was not your day to day. I think there's a little difference there. So like between you and your partner, Matt, okay. So first of all, now that we spoke before we started the show, now I need to go back in time,
Yeah.
because I don't think we actually introduced your partner yet to the audience since we started the actual interview portion. All right. Oh, yeah, you did. You mentioned Matt. He was
I did.
okay. You mentioned
I did. Yeah.
okay. He
Because
started
that's
his
the whole reason that the podcast
y-
exists.
right,
That
right, because he started it because he wanted it. So yes. So we mentioned Matt. So he's a dealer and he wants to do this, and you're doing something else on the side. You meet up in a forum, and now did it seem like there's a difference for you when you were not dealing coins 24/7, and for the difference in maybe perspective between the two of you, because he was a dealer, so your daily life is different when you're dealing with coins every day.
no,
Sometimes I'd even say that the person who's coming, who's not a dealer every day, sometimes has more gusto to put into it. If that makes You meet some dealers that may be a little bit jaded, you
oh
know.
no, I know exactly what you mean. I can tell you how that manifests itself. So because I've gone the entire spectrum now. Okay, so I was working in a warehouse doing relatively mindless work. I was stacking boxes. You drive your machine over, you walk over to the slot, you pick up this 50-pound bag of stuff, you walk over, you set it on the pallet. Now you drive to the next slot. So it's not a lot of brain work. So during all that time that I had, my mind got really bored. And so I decided that I'd just start thinking about, coins and stuff like that. I tried to occupy myself with various things, but when he started, doing the idea of the podcast, I started thinking about coins and like writing in my mind what I wanted to do for our weekly, or we ended up doing it like it was like every 3 weeks. It was so erratic at first, and we had no idea how to structure a show or anything. I mean, you can go back. Every single one of our episodes is available on our website. You go back, you can listen to episode 1, and trust me, if you do, don't send me the medical bills for your bleeding ears, because I mean, we've evolved. We've come a long way. Um, I have always kind of been a wannabe DJ kind of guy. I wanted to do this kind of stuff, get my voice really low. So, I mean, I had that frustrated character in me. So the reading, and my kids are into theater, so dramatic reading and stuff like that is kind of my thing. And I like doing that. Besides the fact my mom always told me I had the looks for radio. So, that
My wife told me to
really,
ask you that question. That's really funny.
yeah. Yeah,
The
no,
the
absolutely.
the the, the radio face.
Yeah, my mom always told me I had the looks for radio, so
Beautiful.
that's where I tend to go. Um, but yeah, so I mean, that was how we put it together, and over the years, I was able to bring a lot of enthusiasm to this project because I was thinking about it all week, and it was like my release. I'd come in and
Right.
boom, there it was, and Matt was like, he would prepare a subject, and he'd come and he'd talk about it, but I mean, it just seemed like the partnership behind getting him to just comment on the things that I was thinking about would really create a really nice discussion about
Right.
some of the things, and then he kind of brought something that he wanted to talk about, and then I created, or we created, a segment for him, and it was called "The Coolest Thing That Walked Into Our Shop."
Okay.
And the coolest thing started in episode 26. We're on episode 181, records tonight. So basically, it was like, look, man, all you got to do is look for something really cool that walks in over the course of whatever interim it is between our recordings, and take a picture of it. We'll post it on our website, and it's like, and then you get something different to talk about all the time. Hey, that might be a pretty good idea. So fast forward to last year in about early January. The U.S. numismatist at Harlan J. Burke decided that he had inherited some property from his grandparents. He wanted to move to Indiana and start his own shop, and he has it. Darren's a great guy, left on really good terms. Everybody at Burke loves him, but they needed a new guy, and Aaron is very tight with Matt. And so he's talking to Matt, and he's like, "Hey, man, I need a new guy. Do you have any idea?" And he's like, "Well, did you ever think about Mike?" And he's like, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I mean, Mike's
Speak.
never worked in the business." Oh, well, I take that back. I did. I worked part time in a small shop, but I mean, trust me, I knew nothing about the business. And he's like, "Mike doesn't really know the business, but he knows coins, and I'm sure that So, so Aaron called me, and and there we went. Now, um, there's a funny part about the story about me getting hired at Burke, where Harlan Burke wanted to talk to me before he hired me. Before Aaron already decided to hire me, but Harlan wanted to talk to me. He says, "So tell me about your podcast." And so I'm telling him, and I'm like, "Well, we do an educational thing. Well, give me an edge." So I told him a story that I used on one of our podcasts, and he looks at me and goes, "I've been in this business for 60 years. I never knew that." I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool." We're sitting there, and it's kind of quiet, and he looks at me and goes, "Well, do you want the job?" I'm like, "Yes, sir." "Okay, go downstairs, talk to Bob."
That's funny. So I'm gonna let me help transition. I have the backstory a little bit in our, so our viewers might not know. So now Mike works for Harlan J. Burke in Chicago, one of the biggest ancient dealers, but they also do U.S. of course. But I think Harlan's always been known as a world and ancient dealer first, but
Yes.
classical numismatist, and so been around forever. And so of course, now you're there because of the Coin Show podcast. You actually got hired on because of the connection with Matt and Aaron that they had together. So, which is great. This the sooner I have to laugh because your interview story. I got when I got hired on here at Old Pueblo, the owner didn't know that I was getting hired. The second in command, he was like, just asked me if I wanted a job. I was a regular customer, and uh, he said he had told the owner, "Oh, the new guy starts Friday," and the owner's like, "What are you talking about? Who's the new guy? Do I know this guy?" So,
It's
did you think the podcast would go this long? You've been at it a decade now, right?
I did not. We've been very blessed in the fact that at first, particularly, we really started getting a lot of interest from around the world. And because and my whole excuse for that is I think it's service people that are stationed overseas that will listen to anything in English. But given that, so we were blessed with some pretty decent listenership.
So now
And
I'm gonna, jump around a little bit here because
okay,
just because of what you said, the big in other countries. This is one of the first things that I found out when I was um, when we first got on Facebook years ago, and then when I got into YouTube and some other stuff. I started seeing a lot of connections, especially with people in the Far East and Middle East. Whether you're in Bangladesh or you're in India, you get a lot of people who from that culture that like coins and collect coins. And so I saw, you click on the demographics and you see all this. So I don't know how many of them know English very well based on some of my comments on YouTube. I don't know that they do, but but now interest overseas. Now you think this is servicemen, but were you getting interest from people tuning in from actually overseas? Do you think?
okay. So the hosting company that we use gives us a map that shows the countries that our podcast is downloaded in and how many in each. So we found ourselves showing up in places like, of course, Australia, New Zealand, the places that spoke English. But then we started looking at the places that didn't speak English. So it was like Germany. Well, I mean, there's a lot of US bases in Germany,
Mm.
Japan, places oh god, it was like Poland. I mean, we were huge in Poland. I just all kinds of odd places that you just really wouldn't think. And like I said, I just really thought that it really was service people because they really were seeking out stuff, in English because there just wasn't that much put out. Now, whether or not that's true, it gave us a little bit of notoriety, and because of that, the American Numismatic Association actually found us, contacted us. The marketing director at the time, Jake Sherlock, said, "Hey guys, I really like your show. Would you like to come and do it from the World's Fair of Money?" And the rest is really history. We've done 3 shows from the World's Fair of Money. Last year, we did a show from the Newman Numismatic Portal Symposium. We'll do that one again this year. Um, I don't think we're doing the ANA this year. I don't think the ANA is happening this year, but we typically have done the ANA when it was in Chicago because that's convenient to me. Matt lives in Indianapolis, so it makes it to where we can both be there. And now that I work in a coin shop, it has changed for me. And you back to your original question of, I mean, don't you find yourself I have to say that it has kind of taken a little bit of the steam out of my engine to say, look, I'm dealing with this stuff, 40 hours a week. And
Yeah.
now I get to think of, but still my enthusiasm is still great for it. And I really love the hobby. And all I do is I talk about stuff that I want and I get to goof off with Matt.
Right.
So the chemistry on our show is such that I love this guy like a brother. We have been to football games together. I mean, we have a good time together, and I think it comes off in the show.
Yeah, I would say so. I definitely agree with you on that. The chemistry is good. For people who don't understand what a podcast is, I didn't get that deep into the education portion of this, but we're going to assume people can figure out what a podcast is. I want to know first of all if people are
Well,
looking for your
could I
podcast.
could I give you definition? So I spoke in front of the Elgin Coin Club,
Uh-huh.
and this was a large portion of people older than me that didn't really they weren't really aware of what a podcast was. So I said, "How many of you guys have heard what a podcast is?" And nobody's hand went up. And I said, "Okay." I said, "This is gonna be perfect." I said, "How many of you listen to the radio?" And it's like, all the hands went up. I said, "Okay." "How many of you listen to talk radio?" Hands stayed up. And I said, "Okay, our show is a show like a talk radio show. but instead of it being on at a specific time in a specific place, it's on the internet where you can just download it and listen to it anytime you want.
And it worked. I mean, you saw some
And
light bulbs go
actually,
off. Yeah,
people were like, yeah. And afterwards, a few of them came, well, then how do you get this podcast? And it's like that
yeah.
it was,
Which was my question. How do you get this podcast? Let's tell the
okay, well,
people here.
our podcast, the
I
Coin
assume
Geek
if they watch YouTube, they know what a podcast is, but you never know.
yeah. Our podcast, the Coin Show podcast, is available on let's see, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Um, it's available on Spreaker. It's available on Stitcher. I mean, if you
Are all your new episodes
iTunes,
on YouTube?
Apple Podcasts,
Are all your new episodes on YouTube?
all of our episodes, we do them live on YouTube.
Yeah.
So there's a live version, a streamed version, and then there's an edited version, which just we do like 2 minutes of setting up the stream to sync everything up. So it's like if you don't want to listen to 2 minutes of, or you don't want to fast forward through 2 minutes of music, yeah, there's a live version of it, and yeah.
Well, let's Mike. Let's jump into social media. Thanks, guys, for watching, and remember to like and subscribe. That helps the show out tremendously. Thanks so much for watching.